unless you catch a fish, right? So that was a constraint that made sense to me that you could actually make a game out of. So that's kind of what I was thinking there.
I can see, I can definitely see it. Like, it is contained in the visual language of Sinker. Like, and I suppose another question is, given the similarities between Sinker and Sinker 2, what got transitioned over to the second game, and what got changed?
Right. So actually, the contraptions in Syncer 2 are the same minus one. I took one out to concentrate on just the ones that I thought made the most sense to me, is that were fun. I really like to make games that are fun for me. I just don't think it makes any sense to try to make a game that you don't enjoy playing yourself. So what I did is I kind of distilled out the mechanics that I liked from the first game, and I changed the ramp up time to be quicker. I reused a few of the tutorials to teach the game, because there's only so many ways to teach some of the contraptions. But mostly it's a deep dive into my favorite, mechanics. So for instance, in Sinker 2, there'll be just different scenarios like interlocking spirals of lines that you have to pass pucks between the hooks, on different lines. Whereas the first game, it was more straightforward and linear. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. And I suppose I should ask, what was the mechanic that you took out?
I have I have names for everything, and what I call it is the ratcheter. Is the one I took out. It's the one that was a gear, and it would rotate 90 degrees in a fixed direction every time a puck hit it. And when you can interact, most of these contraptions you can interact with, and when you could interact with that ratcheter, you could change the direction it would go when a puck hit it, and that was all fine. I still think it's clever, but there were too many things that I have to keep together in my head when I'm solving the puzzles that have the ratcheter, and I'm always wondering, when does it get too much, the bookkeeping, to solve a puzzle? Because I really like, once you've learned the mechanics, I want people to be able to solve the puzzle immediately by looking at the game screen before they press a hook or a lever or do anything. I like to, once you understand the mechanics, you should be able to solve the puzzle just by looking at it, because they're very deterministic. But I guess it's just me. I just couldn't hold all of the complexity of the ratcheter in my head, because that really adds a lot of complexity. So I took it out. But I know there are people have told me they like that and they're sorry to see it go. But again, I think you just have to make the game that you really want to make and play, and that's just how it is.
I can see the logic behind that. If that was a thing that was becoming too difficult to handle in terms of development.
Not in terms of development. It's certainly not that. It's more in the terms of I didn't enjoy playing those puzzles as much as I enjoyed the rest of them, so that's why I took it out.
It's still same philosophy applies. I mean, it was a slog making those puzzles, so
Yeah.
Now, you got rid of that mechanic in Sinker 2. Did you add any brand new ones to the sequel?
No brand new contraptions. I'm saving that for another product if and when I actually do it. But this one, like I said, it just the same contraptions minus one. One of the things that I did that really changes the game for me is I added in a level selector that's like a mini map that's always there on the right hand side of the screen, and that's not in the original game. And what I wanted to do with that was to kind of root you in the game and let you see where you are and what's coming up next, what you can skip, which is new in this version. And to see, when you get a new contraption, you can kind of tell, because the grouping of the levels usually ends with the mini boss level, and you get a new contraption. So I think I've gotten some good feedback on having that mini map, always there. But you can turn it off, or most of it, in the options, if you want the, very clean screen. But that's a big difference from the original Sinker, the level select mini map thing.
Yeah, I'm remembering that now. It's like I don't recall seeing that in the Sinker 1. Like, and like how many levels are in Sinker 2 versus Sinker 1?
Yeah, so there's the original Sinker had 60 levels. It was about 2.5 to 3.5 hours of playtime. I added 7 backports from Sinker 2, which I guess technically was a new feature. I call them squircles, where there's squares inside a circle. So technically, I guess there is a new contraption in Sinker 2. But since I backported it to Sinker 1, I don't count it as new. But in Sinker 2, there are 87 levels, which translates to about an hour more of playtime. So like 3.5, 4.5 hours of playtime. So, Sinker 2 is actually more difficult than Sinker 1 in terms of the puzzles are take a little bit longer, especially the ones toward the end. So yeah, a little bit longer playtime.
I know, like in Sinker 2, it has multiple solutions this time around.
Well, the original one did too, but I've gotten feedback from people that think that some of the multiple solutions shouldn't have been there, and that maybe some of the puzzles should only have one solution. And I just wanted to make sure my marketing speak was correct there, and that people understood that multiple solutions were intentional. Although every once in a while, an unintended solution will slip by me, and maybe I'll correct it, and maybe I won't. But yeah. The first game did have multiple solutions for puzzles once you get past the tutorials.
That's good to know. I'm like, and like now in terms of the actual creation process, was it ever like difficult in terms of coming up with like actually building the logic behind the puzzles, how they all worked and stuff?
You mean technically, or coming up with the puzzles themselves? I mean,
The puzzles themselves. I'm talking conceptually. Like making
right.
sure the thing goes there and such.
Yeah, that's I have a process for that, and basically what I do is I get 3x5 cards out and I draw them in pencil, and I'll try to draw a whole set of levels for a particular mechanic, from the tutorial all the way through to the little mini boss level, and I'll lay them out. As soon as I get enough of them that I'm thinking ready to put them in the computer, I'll lay them out on my desk and I'll rearrange them and tweak them a little bit before I ever start coding them up. And sometimes it takes just no time at all to come up with puzzles. Sometimes some of them I'll iterate on them for days, and my wife is actually a big help with this. We like to run a lot, and I'll bug her constantly to chat with me about what kinds of things I could change in the game to make it more interesting. And so she's been a big help, and she'll show up in the credits on both games because of that. But yeah, so the process is mostly, draw it down on paper, iterate on it a little bit, put it in the computer, and then iterate it on them some more. And generally, they don't ever look quite like they do when I drew them. Once you start, working with them for real in the computer, they do change quite a bit.
Not shocked to hear that. Now it's kind of game development in general. How much stuff stays the same is not often, not often at all, in terms of bringing stuff from the paper to the screen, as it were.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But if somebody asked me if I storyboarded, there's not a narrative, but I consider that storyboarding, where you actually draw it out and you lay it out in sequence on your, in paper before you actually get started.
Yeah, I could see it. And do you have this game is complete, correct?
Yes. It is complete. It's available on mobile and on Steam, and I've completed a Switch port, so that'll be out sometime, I hope, this year. And I'm working on an Xbox port as well.
Oh. So does that mean there will be no more content for this game?
Sinker 2, the content is complete now. Like on Sinker 1, I did do a content drop after I created Sinker 2 and backported some of that to Sinker 1. And I'll probably do the same thing again. I have some ideas for what I'm tentatively calling Sinker Deluxe, and it's the big idea is I want to introduce circles and diagonals in the game, so some sort of you know complete big change up. And if I can't come up with that, I don't think I'll do a Sinker 3 or Sinker Deluxe, because I think, in order to have another product in this line be successful, I really have to have a big hook, as you will, to bring people back. And so if I do that, I'll certainly backport some stuff into this one, the Sinker 2.
I could see that. And in terms of developing the games for the consoles, have you had to change any of like the controls, tweak that any degree?
Yeah, well, the Sinker has always had controller support, because I originally launched the first one with NVIDIA Shield on their Indie Spotlight section, so you can get the game on the Android TV. So it's always had controller support, but it the, as I've worked on these console ports, I've realized that it's not the best controller support. So I've really worked hard last 6-7 weeks redoing the controller support. That's not going to affect how mouse or touch players work, but for controller players, it's going to be a completely different experience, and hopefully much smoother and nicer.
Mm. And in regards to the Switch version, is that going to use the touch controls on that system?
Yeah, you'll be able to switch, no pun intended, back and forth without any issues. So you can use the touch screen, or you can use the Joy Cons, or you can use the Pro controller. Yeah, you can just swap back and forth.
That's good to hear, because this game looks like it'll be it's a good fit for touch.
Yeah, but I'm a console gamer. I mean, I have tons of Steam games too, but I like playing games sitting on the couch. So, the 10-foot TV experience with controller is pretty much the way I enjoy playing games. So I want to make sure all my games work well that way as well. And when I play Switch games, it's primarily all on the TV as well.
Yeah, I see there's big picture support for it.
Yeah.
And let me see. Gallitz, do you have any questions about Synchro 1 or 2?
Well, I've been playing too, and the mechanics seem pretty simple. I'm afraid my brain can't think quite this far ahead in some cases, because
Yeah, are you
I'm on.
playing? You're playing on 14 now. That's one of the first levels that you can actually skip if you want. You can bring up there's a rating system in it now. You'll notice that one, higher rated level. You can actually go up to 15, get a new mechanic now, and come back to that one later.
Yeah, I usually don't like to skip things in puzzle games.
I hear that a lot.
Just as
Yeah, me
a
too.
matter of, I don't want to say pride, but as a matter of
I understand
approaching
it.
things in an order.
Mm. But I specifically made sure that some of these levels you could skip, because myself, I don't like to get locked in a game where I can't progress or see more of it just because one puzzle is stumping me at the moment. I'm going to be able to solve it later. So I wanted to make sure that some of the more difficult ones you could come back to later and still progress.
So you can put round pegs in square holes, but not the other way around.
Yeah, that's still. There was a TV show when I was a kid called Square Pegs, and I swear that's what I was thinking of when I created that mechanic. I think it was Sarah Jessica Parker, something before the Friends thing.
Anyway, let me see. Now, in terms of development here, have you ever considered doing alternate modes? That is to say, like time mode, score mode, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think about that. But again, I think I don't like to play those kinds of games myself, so I'm afraid I wouldn't do them justice. I mean, I understand the appeal, but since I don't actually play games that have timers, or I or scores. I don't try to design games that way. So no, probably not.
I can understand that. I'm like, those are a common feature in um, many kinds of puzzle games, and they do add a stress factor. Even if you aren't penalized for, like taking long, like 3 minutes longer on a level than par time or something like that, but it's still, you get rewarded for like getting 3 stars, gold star, whatever. That is additional
Yeah,
pressure.
I really understand the whole motivation behind it. I just don't do well with them myself. And one of the design goals in both the Sinker games was to make a relaxing game that made you feel smart. And if I don't think that the scores or timers would help me to feel smart or relaxed, so I didn't include them and really don't have any intention to, not in this particular game.
Fair enough. And let's see. Have you ever considered how do I put this? Like releasing uh, creation tools for the Sinker games. Like have the user generated content.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to do like a Steam Workshop version. I actually use the editor in Unity to make these puzzles, and that's kind of unusual, mostly because I like to do data-driven games where you can just read in levels out of text scripts or Lua or JSON or something. But in this case, you actually have to design them in Unity editor because they're a little complicated. So technically, if I could overcome some of the technical issues of making an editor, I would consider it if I thought that it would be, make any sense. I mean, would people actually use it, and if people would create levels? And I'm not sure that they would, so I haven't, made steps in that direction.
I suppose that's the sort of thing you would workshop. You'd like
Yeah,
ask people on, I don't know, social media or something if they would be interested in a level editor.
right. I've not been successful in actually getting answers on things like that too. It's just really hard for me. So basically, what I do is I think about it myself. Would I actually pick up a tool like that and want to make levels? And the answer is almost yes. So I've actually considered making a game that was actually where you actually had to design the level to finish it as part of the game. But I haven't gotten very far with that idea. But generally, I like the idea of like Mario Maker kind of things where you can build levels. So it's not off the books. I just haven't made any plans in that direction.
Mm, makes sense. Like from my vantage point, this does seem like a game that would work well with a level creator, but I could also see how it would go awry. Since, yeah,
Yeah,
I
because
played about
one of
20
the
or
things that oh sorry.
yeah, I played about 20 levels so far, and this game does get a lot more complicated as it goes on. Like,
Yeah,
it,
one of the things that I'm concerned about with making a level maker is that every time I put a new mechanic or something in the game, I have to rigorously test it. And since I've written my own physics for the games, and invariably somebody that's making levels that I don't control are going to find issues with it and want changes, and it's going to be a lot of work. So that's also one of the things in the back of my mind. Do I really want to support it? Because people are going to find scenarios that are completely reasonable that they want to build, but this physics that I built don't support that yet. So that's a consideration.
indeed. And in terms of computer support, is this game Windows only, or is it Mac and Linux as well?
It's definitely all the platforms that I can fit it on. I spent 10 years as a Linux sysadmin, so I want to make sure Linux is supported. Mac is my main computer, so I obviously want to support that as well. But I do have Windows boxes and I have an Xbox, so yeah, cross-platform.
Yeah. And as was my final question is, after the Xbox One port, would PlayStation 4 be next?
Yeah, if the other ones do well enough to warrant it, yes. Because I do play on a PlayStation. They have some nice exclusives, and it makes sense to me. But each different platform has its own idiosyncrasies, and they take the first game you do on any given platform is a lot of work, and I find that every time I start on a new system, and so this just depends on whether the Xbox and Switch ports are commercially successful, whether I'll do the PlayStation as well.
Makes sense to me. And can you mention anything about your next project at this point in time that it wouldn't be Sinker 2, Sinker 3, or Sinker Deluxe or anything like that?
Yeah, well, I'm working right now on this another puzzle game with a similar scope, and it's about spotting rotational symmetry, and try to think of it like a Rubik's cube, but in 2D, and you can do certain like in Sinker, I make up my own physics and decide what you can and can't do, and you have to take these almost like a hidden object game. You look at this big color pattern and try to figure out how to rotate it into another pattern. So it's still really rough. I'm still alpha. Only a few people have seen it. But if that works out, maybe 6-8 months, I'll have something people can play.
All right. Well, we might have you on the program again to talk about that project when it's in further development.
Cool. Yeah.
And until then, Gullich, do you have any final questions?
No, but it looks like you got a pretty decent puzzle thingy here, so I'm enjoying it.
Yeah. All right.
Oh, good to hear. Good to hear. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it.
No problem. The game is Sinker 2. You can pick it up standalone or with the original Sinker on pretty much any computer platform. It's available on Steam, on Android, not just like Google Play, but like Android TV. It's on iOS, and it's coming soon to consoles. Anyway, it's available for $2.99 standalone, or picking it up in a bundle for currently $2.98.
Yeah, Adam, can I plug the bundle just released today on Steam? You can pick up. I love this bundle name. It's called Hook, Line, and Sinker. That's Lyne. And so you can pick up the game Hook, Line, and Sinker, and Lines X, which are all similar games for one price on Steam, and they are actually inspiration games for me. So really appreciate those games, playing those games, as well as Sinker games.
All right, then. So be sure to pick up your preferred pack today. All right. So that'll about do it for this installment of Fragments of Silicon. Be sure to tune in on Sunday for our regular review session. And until then, I shall wish you good gaming.